Good morning and welcome to the Leadership and Insurance podcast. I'm your host, Alex Bond, and I'm very lucky today to be joined by Huw Edwards of CyberFortress. Huw, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much.
Good. And I love to do a little geography check. You're speaking to me from Austin, Texas, is that right?
I'm speaking from San Antonio, Texas, so about an hour down the road. But as you can tell from my accent, I'm from West Texas. No, I'm from Wales, though I've been living in the States now about 12 years.
How does the Welsh accent go down in the down the States? Does it cause for confusion? Do they just assume that you're British of some description, or?
Exactly. I mean, it causes a little confusion. Most people guess that I'm British, but I do get a lot of because of the Welsh versus the traditional English accent or BBC English that they're familiar with, they think maybe I'm Australian. Sometimes they think I'm South African. So I get a little bit of that. But by and large, any variation of a British accent goes down well. North, south, east or west, Wales, Scottish, Ireland, England, tends to go over pretty well over here in the US.
The Australian thing, I used to get quite a lot. Whenever I've been to the States, people have asked me if I'm Australian. I've no idea why. But that maybe my Essex dulcet tones, I'm not sure. But anyway, I digress. Obviously, CyberFortress, for those of the people that don't know at home, it'd be interesting if you could just introduce what you guys do and what you're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. So we are an insurtech, a startup, and we're reinventing the way the risk of doing business on the internet is assessed and priced. And what that looks like right now is we've sort of built a proprietary underwriting model to price downtime of websites. And we have our first product in market, which is basically a parametric insurance product for e-commerce that pays out lost revenue when their websites are down, based on how many hours they're down and payment made within 24 hours.
And when is that live now? That's
it is live. It's live in Texas. For e-commerce companies in Texas, looking to expand more nationwide, also looking to partner with some larger service providers, because our vision here is that it's as easy to add as the travel insurance to the flight, and looking to embed when you're signed up for some hosting or domain, can you, one check add, hey, I want to protect the online revenue. I want a revenue guarantee for $23 a month. Check it.
Yeah. Awesome. Great model. So much going on there. That's like insurtech buzzword heaven, parametrics, embedded insurance. We're there. At a bit of business interruption. I mean, it's just look at that.
We've got the trifecta there, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know. What we're going to unpack first. I mean, I think one thing I wanted to come back to is just what's currently the distribution model. How are you getting it out there?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we're still a super early stage company. We're 5 people. We've really built this proprietary model, and we're looking to get it, find the right partners to get that out there into the market. We're selling directly on our website right now, but that's not our target vision. And so we have a couple of, our pipeline, a couple of big partners in our pipeline, like digital brokers, but also web hosting potential partners. And so that's kind of interesting there because, the embedded insurance, it's still early, but being embedded as a guarantee because everyone's online right now and their sites being down is just unacceptable. Now, most service providers have large uptime guarantees for their service, but the truth is that people's websites go down usually because they make mistakes, because they're human. We're all human and we're small, but we're focused on small businesses, and small businesses don't have big teams. They're growing quickly, trying to add customers, update products, scale, learn, adapt. So yeah.
And of course, using a parametric trigger, presumably there's none of that kind of complication of going, was it your fault or not? It's just it's down, kicks it, pays out. Is that
precisely
right?
And that exactly. And sort of, my background is sort of finance, also technology at a large cloud provider called Rackspace here in Texas. That's what brought me down here. But most recently, prior to CyberFortress, the genesis of that was a business I bought that was cybersecurity software for small businesses. And it was serving those small businesses there that we sort of realized that as well, that small businesses don't have working capital. They don't have cash on hand. And when we spoke to them about their insurance, that wasn't a great experience. I mean, that's a pretty common, I'm sure a lot of people on your podcast, this is a common theme. There's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of great stuff in insurance. There's a lot of opportunity for improvement. And we've seen incredible, evolutions and leaps and bounds in recent years. But that whole getting paid out quickly thing is really challenging for a small business. And so that's for us, it was sort of, okay, your site is down. How many hours down over a waiting period? Boom, payout. And similarly as well, it's like for a small business, they don't really care why they're down, right? And so what's neat about us is that in our underwriting, we capture the human element. So it's not that we're sort of in an unchecked risks here. We collect downtime on hundreds of thousands of e-commerce domains. And so that's if they're up or if they're down. And we're doing that every sort of 10 minutes for, about 500,000 e-commerce domains in the US right now. And that allows us to build a picture of downtime, how often, frequency of downtime events, how long, how severity. And we can actually use that to price. But the cool thing is like, we don't know why they're down. And most of those events are actually because of their own mistakes, etc. So our underlying data is congruent with what we're offering the policy, which protects cyber attacks, software issues or glitches, third-party failures, and that could be a Shopify issue, but it could be electrical grid that impacts Google, that impacts Shopify, that have multiple, contingencies there. And also it covers like you make a mistake updating that product, or you try to add a new plugin and it has some conflict and has an issue and brings your site down.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much going on there, but I think the one thing that you kind of brought it back to is that, the risks on the cyber side, and if you've got an online business, continue to evolve. And as a business owner, as someone that runs his own business, I have enough problem with my own website, which is very much a brochure website. It doesn't really do anything. If it went down, it wouldn't be a disaster. It just doesn't look very professional. But you've got enough going on that you don't want to have to worry about this. Is your plan to kind of tie in with some of the kind of maybe cybersecurity response teams or like businesses as well? Is that a route you want to go down?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it has been more focused on where the e-commerce person is right now and what they're buying, who's their trusted provider there. And so they're trusting their hosting provider or their e-commerce platform. And so that's a very natural point there to either be offered as an add-on or embedded so that someone can say, hey, our hosting is better than yours because we have a no downtime guarantee. And we'll pay out lost, not just an SLA that might pay out a little, some portion of what you paid them last month, but actually can pay out a meaningful amount of what's lost revenue. So that is our true, when we saw this, we're like, it's in that realm of embedded insurance. And I think, Angela Strange came out with an article in Andreessen recently, which talked again about embedded insurance being the future. You buy the car and it comes with the insurance, right? You buy a maintenance plan at the vet, it comes with pet insurance. You buy a domain from GoDaddy, it comes with cyber insurance, right? But we're not there yet, right? We're kind of a long way in many ways from there. So for us, it's really like, what we found as well as a startup, and we knew this going in, we didn't believe that this was a direct to consumer model. But you ask, any insurtech out there, it's trying to sell direct, it's really hard, right? And if your product is not mandated by law or required, in your industry or by your vendors or customers or whatever, it can be pretty challenging to cut through the noise and get someone there. So that's where we're also, our sort of parallel paths on that one. And we're quite far ahead with one was with some digital brokers that are already at scale. Because remember, this is a pretty cheap product. We only need a business email address. So we just need their domain, which we can get from the business email address to price the policy. And then how much revenue do they want to cover to scale up, because it's parametric to scale up how much. And that's it. And so it's really kind of someone's buying a business owner's policy in a digital platform and is all the way, towards the end. And it's like, hey, do you want to protect the online revenue for an extra in that case, maybe an extra $5 a month or $3 a month because they might their online revenue might not be a huge portion, might not be 100%. Or it might be, in their case, might be another $100 a month, but that's like an absolute bargain. And for peace of mind that like, hey, I have all this stuff online being sold right now. What happens if that goes down? That's not actually covered in my BOP or my usual business interruption, which sort of has more exclusions for online or human error related to online and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think generally that's it seems to be that's the small business owners. The problem is that there's an education piece there, right? I don't think people are aware of what the risks are, or how big the problem can be. So yeah, I think that, I was talking to someone about cyber recently in the US market, and there's a lot more kind of high net worth individuals taking out their own personal cyber insurance policies. Mm-hmm. Absolute sense. And as they were telling me, I was sitting there thinking, I wouldn't put myself as a high net worth individual, but I've never even considered that I might think, oh, actually, I probably could get a personal policy myself, or even checked how much my business cyber cover is, because I don't have sales, but obviously I have data, and so I think there's just a big education piece, particularly on the small business side. People aren't quite there yet, so I can see where that challenge comes from.
And that is a real challenge because by and large, from what we have observed and seen, and what is like by and large reported from particularly a lot of the large players and the people we partner with in terms of insurers in the industry. Most people who are buying cyber insurance are buying it because they're required to buy it.
Yeah.
Now, you're a Fortune 500 company, you have to buy cyber insurance. Your board is going to be, opening themselves up for, some real, class action or any kind of things if something does happen and they hadn't procured that. But then it's like you're any small business that, hey, you're trying to land that deal with that bigger company. It's a fair point, post target, right? That a lot of big companies will just like all their vendors have to carry cyber insurance. So, and then again, maybe dependent in certain, as we may see the markets evolve for what's required by law, in what industries you might have to carry certain things. And we're going to continue to see that. But outside, and in that case there, people will muscle through. Like if I've got a big client deal there and they say, hey, you need to carry a cyber insurance policy, we find a broker and go do it. If I knew nothing about it, I would like, who's my nearest broker? I don't know what I don't know what I need. Oh, I don't know anything about it, but this is what I need to tick these boxes. I need to tick the boxes, right? And so there's a muscling through there. And we wanted to solve that, but then everyone else, it's like, oh my God, no thanks. That's too complicated. I don't understand exclusions. Is it even going to be there? But even then, like with us, which is why we're so focused on partnering, is because the education piece, like people don't know, right? And so we made the policy so simple. Even when you're doing something simple, everyone has preconceptions about insurance. So if it's so simple, they then question that it's actually real, right? So it's sort of like a double whammy. You only need the business email address. We can do this in a couple of minutes. Like you don't need to speak to a human. We're so built up on that. That's why you see with a number of firms which have done some amazing things in recent years, they're also facing challenges. But take someone like Lemonade. Who has done amazing things, also facing some challenges right now based on latest earnings and what I saw in the last couple of days. But they really, found a way to really have people like sign up on their phones, in minutes. And that's kind of really cool. But people need to buy renter's insurance, so there is that need there. It's just fascinating. You try to make something simple, and then you hit a whole other wave of objections and questions. And so it's like, who is someone already trusted? That's the kind of thing there. And so if you're already, we are not there yet, but that would be the holy grail, right? For someone like us, would be like to either have our offer embedded in Shopify in some way, where at a higher service level, Shopify offer, revenue protection, or revenue guarantee, and it's backed by us. Maybe publicly, maybe just purely behind the scenes, or maybe there's, as they, Shopify's already, I think, I'm not sure the exact, maybe it's half of their revenue comes from payments, right? And Shopify Pay, and have their white label in that whole Stripe. I think it's a Stripe service there. And so it's really fascinating to me that you may see these folks doing more and more, financial services offerings when it makes sense at the right time. Yeah. But until then, that's it. We're just trying to find who is already in a buying decision for insurance, and can we easily be added?
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I definitely think there's a danger in sort of oversimplicity. Yeah, it's funny. Some things you don't want to be that easy, and maybe buying insurance is one of them. It's a bit like going to the doctor. Like, there's a load of stuff we could answer online, but still kind of want to sit in front of someone and tell them, answer the same questions I probably would have done electronically. But yeah, I want to sort of take a bit of a pivot in this conversation, and you and I obviously spoke before this podcast, and it's probably something we connected on was we were talking about kind of coping with adversity, and I think that's really interesting. You and I shared some stories. I'm gonna put this on the podcast now because then I'll have to do it. But I'm telling you that I just signed up to do my first ultra marathon of 100K, and then you told me some terrifying stories about doing lots of ultra marathons, and we got into this kind of coping with adversity. And I really wanted to ask you, you've been involved in kind of startups and before, not this. Is that the key thing, like, to entrepreneurial success, like the ability to cope with adversity? Is that, because it seems to be like the theme that I speak to people about, saying the ability to deal with that is almost above everything else, the key to success. In your view, obviously, you can't speak.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think it is huge. Yeah. This is my first startup. It's my second entrepreneurial venture. Mm-hmm. I'm sort of, 2021, 5 years into that. From that, I previously, basically followed a corporate life. Mm-hmm. And the thing with what I found with entrepreneurship and startups is, like, it's a roller coaster, right? And there are highs, and there are lows, and coping with those lows. And it's that, for me, it's the roller coaster is that analogy, because it's like, if you're familiar with riding roller coasters, there's two things you could do. There's actually three things you can do in a roller coaster, right? You can hang on for dear life, right? On that, and gripping, white knuckling, and you're tense and kind of being jarred by the whole experience. And on the other hand, you can let go and just scream, and that is its own kind of a little out of control. And then there's that element of just like, I'm just gonna go with it. Yeah, I'm gonna feel poised. Maybe I'm holding on, but I'm not holding on too tightly. I'm not like, I'm not then being thrown around because I'm hanging on so tight and jarred. I'm not totally flung around because I've just let go and I'm just like hoping and praying. And so that's the analogy for me. And it's this idea that, like, of realizing, I think Andreessen again has, Mark Andreessen specifically over the years has published so much on sort of the blog and his personal blog and stuff about, like, a startup is basically an innovation looking for a business model, right? And everyone's going to tell you no. It's like, because if everyone said yes, then it would already be adopted and it would be de facto, and right, so there's that with the adversity, the acknowledgement that, like, it's going to be a lot of doors constantly closed. It's going to be a lot of no, or like not now, and continue to try to, like, learn, iterate, be creative, be nimble, be flexible and adaptable. And you sort of started it off, and I love that you've put it out there publicly now in the podcast about this ultra marathon, this 100K. I fell into this, the ultras sort of marathons. I went from sort of couch to, like, ultra, and it sounds like you've had a somewhat similar path as well. Like, I sort of, like, never was a runner, but sort of in the space of a year went from, like, couch 5K, trail marathon, attempting 100-miler. Yeah. Didn't make it, failed at mile 87. And what learnings I got from that failure. Yeah. And then I've run a lot of ultras since, and I've subsequently gone back to that race and finished that race two other times. And the funny thing there is that the cool thing about ultras is that it's a little bit more of a constrained environment, right? Then, because life is very multivariable, particularly, and startup life is so multivariable. Ultras is a little more constrained. And so there's a lot more, you're in control yourself and don't have dependencies so much on other people. But then there are all these other things out of your control, like running a marathon is super hard. Running a marathon fast, really hard. But most people, if they've trained and they start a marathon, this is not a question of if they're going to finish. This is a question if they run the race they want to run, get the time they want to get, have the experience they want. You know, do they start off strong and finish stronger? Do they start off hard as can be and blow up and crawl across the finish line? You know, there's a lot of variability there. But in ultras and any 100-miler, and I think you ask any of the top, the people who are actually running competitively doing these, it's not clear if they'll finish the race. Right? It's just not, because there's so much can happen. Your nutrition, it's an eating competition as much as a running or fitness competition, because running for 24 hours, you've got to fuel. Yeah. And who knows what happens to your stomach? And if you're at altitude, what happens to your stomach? And what happens to your feet and what happens to your body? And then I've run ultras in Texas where it's been over 100 degrees. Yeah. And how do you do that? And then I've been runs in Colorado where at night it's dropped below freezing. And how do you, it's got wet. So I had one where I got drenched and then everyone's almost getting hypothermia and you shelter in for like an hour to try to warm up with space blankets to then go back out. I mean, now that was a complete ramble. But I think the cool thing there is that doing ultras or any kind of thing where you're facing some adversity, sort of learn that it's like, this stuff's going to happen, right? It's going to happen. Stuff's going to go wrong. And how I got through it. One foot, ultimately in ultras, take one more step and one more step and one more step. But then there's also the adapting, okay, how did I respond to that? How did I deal with I couldn't take food down and slowed down, rested, whatever, water, how do I slow? What was it? Or like I said, the weather or any of these things, adapting. And so what's cool then, and this was ultras was my field. There's so many other fields, for your listeners here in life that they may be doing, where facing that adversity or challenge and overcoming it in one aspect of your life can then really help you in others, in particular, for example, entrepreneurship and startups. It's like, okay, this is another one of those.
Yeah. I mean, another thing that we were sort of talking about, sharing our days, and I was saying that I had this lunchtime kind of rant, which my partner had to sit through, and she was just kind of listening, and it's that small business culture, and that's why I wanted to talk about the ultras, because I think they're just the perfect analogy. Like you can plan as much as you like. What we can almost guarantee, almost not quite, is that you can't rock up at a 100-mile race and then just start running and think that you're going to be successful. So you can do as much preparation as possible, but you absolutely guarantee that something is going to go wrong. Many things are going to go wrong. And you can train as much as you like, but your kind of ability to kind of get back on track, one foot in front of the other, is kind of the key. So, I mean, what I think it comes down to is there's a lot of innate stuff in how you're put together, your mindset. Do you think you can learn? Do you think you can learn to be an entrepreneur? Because I'm a bit skeptical. I think some people are kind of cut out for it and some aren't. But that's just my opinion. I don't know if that's the right one or not.
I think it's a great question. Truthfully, I don't know. I think I think you can train for almost anything. Yeah. Like, for example, I was not a runner. I have memories of coming last in the running race in junior school, right? I won't use the word kindergarten. That's what they'd use here in America or whatever. But at sports day and the dash or whatever, I'm coming last. So I never got, and then I'd done some sport. I got into rowing at one point and that was fun. But then I'd you look at me back in 2011 and when I was finishing business school, I was not a runner. I could never have been a runner. But I had a spark, and then one thing led to another, and then I trained, and and so that training. So I think there's a lot that you can train. So the question is, can you train entrepreneurship? I think there are certain things that you can train there, and obviously you can practice and learn. I do think there might be the thing I would say is I think there's an innate creativity in all of us, I believe. But then I think for certain people, there's an innate some of the characteristics that will lead well to entrepreneurship: creativity, dealing with adversity, vision, ignorance in some ways. Like, if I knew now what I know about insurance 3 years ago, I don't, maybe I wouldn't have started CyberFortress. Maybe I've done. My co-founder and I were reminiscing the other day. We were, and this might segue into one of your questions, is that we are not insurance people, right? And so it was like, we were going to RIMS 2018. It was in San Antonio, Texas. RIMS is one of the big, risk manager insurance conferences in the US. Yeah. And I remember our strategy. We had a strategy for that conference. Was like, no lemons, not look like a lemon. That was our strategy, because we are clueless about insurance. We don't know the secret handshakes. We don't know enough about the industry. We don't know the lingo, the jargon. So part of our strategy was like, let's go, let's have good energy, let's learn, let's talk to people, let's be open, let's not, it was like, just not be lemons, right? And if I knew everything now that I know, it's like, God, we might have taken different paths, right? And so, the question with entrepreneurship as well, I was not a born, I was not, whether there's such a thing or as a born entrepreneur or not, but like, I didn't have the lawn mowing business. I didn't do his lemonade stand. I wasn't, then creating my own like stock portfolio that was my, trading stocks, in my teens, that was like entrepreneurial. I was really good at maths, and I was really good at school and achieving and success and setting goals and achieving them and setting goals and achieving them. And I think that, and then facing adversity along the way with that. But I think there was an inkling, right? And it's like, for me, in my journey, I spent a lot of time in financial services, at Goldman Sachs, at the biggest hedge fund in the world, Bridgewater, which has a particularly unique and amazing culture for the right people in that culture, and horrible if it's not right for you. And it's very, there's culture of radical truth and transparency. And look, we can all say, I want to learn from my weaknesses, learn from my mistakes. I want to understand my weaknesses and strengths. But when you're put into that cauldron day to day, it's a very, very challenging environment. And certainly wasn't right for me. And so in many ways, like, there was this, creativity and, search for purpose. And also, I will say, I don't like to be told what to do, quite frankly. And so, you'll find that's pretty common with all entrepreneurs, whether it's, startups to just starting your small business. They wanted to be their own boss and didn't want someone to tell them what to do. And so
that's definitely my thing. I mean, I that's the thing about me is I don't even say that with any particular pride, because I don't think it's a massively positive thing to do.
No, absolutely not.
I'm a really difficult person if I don't agree with you, and that's that's something that I need to be better at. But corporate life for me, I found it quite toxic for me, and that doesn't mean it's for everyone else. It just, for me, it brought out the worst in me, because I was constantly railing against it. So I worked for Huws, like the largest, one of the largest recruitment companies in the world. It's a great business to go and work, and you can build a brilliant career there. But I was just railing against every kind of corporate element of it, because it just didn't suit me. And I think you touched on creativity there. I think that's the other thing as well. And I think business allows you to be creative. And I think that's a key thing to success. And I think corporate life doesn't. In many respects, corporate life is very, it parents you. It's very all encapsulating. You can be cosseted by it. And I think that's where I think people do have innate creativity, but unfortunately, I think it can get sort of structured out of them by, we like people to sit in certain silos, do certain jobs, and we don't allow them the kind of flexibility to look at other things. And therefore, that creativity, it doesn't disappear, but it dies down. It's like a muscle, I think.
Yeah, I think that is right. And you see this as well, like, all big corporates were a startup at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And as they grew and evolve, and look, in our industry now, insurance, like some of these, businesses are hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
And they really have evolved to be very, very good at what they do. And often, Bridgewater is obviously not 100 years old, but like Bridgewater was all about principles. That was Ray's, and he's written his book on principles that I'm sure a lot of your listeners have come across or seen. And it's a fascinating read if you haven't read it. And the fact that he broke everything down to principles that made sense for him. And then everything was being systemized so that it could be repeatable at an excellent level. And that's cool. We've seen that, it's in a way the sort of industrial revolution and what that did, like the production line to be able to manufacture and consistently, etc. But then you need people often, typically in that machine to run those processes. And then that's where this sort of creativity goes, because there's an element, and most businesses and most corporates say they want to continue to, innovate and evolve and improve those processes. But it's often challenging, and often you are a cog in a machine, in someone else's machine. And that can be awesome at times. And I think it can be awesome for certain people, particularly if you love that role you're playing and that really plays to your strengths, your drives, your wants, your purpose almost. And that can work in a corporate setting. But it can also be stifling. And and constraining and mute a lot of that innate creativity that some people and lots of people often feel. And I know I felt that, and it sounds like you did as well. And then realizing then what, levels of freedom or flexibility, I realized I like to be able to work from wherever I want, right? And so, but we've seen now, maybe a lot of people might have felt that, but they were stuck in a corporate environment. But now COVID, and potentially of this last year, they haven't quite yet to work wherever they want. They've got to now work from home instead of in the office, as opposed to maybe working in a coffee shop or working in Bali or whatever it might be. But there's been a change in this past year, which has, changed the frame, I think, for potentially a lot of people in that corporate environment, where that one of those aspects that may have been great for them. I know plenty of people, like, they just love to go to work because they just like, I can't work at home. I don't want to be, there. I like to go in there. I like to be, to walk around, see what people are doing, talk to people walk into my office, walk into their office. Great. That's awesome, right? Yeah. But I also know others where it's like, for me, it's like, I want that flexibility to sort of be able to do that work from home, because I sometimes want to be holed up in a dark closet, with no distractions at home, or I want to be in an environment where conversation can happen, right? And so,
yeah, that's been a really interesting conversation over the last kind of 18 months, because I think there was definitely, on my part specifically, was a real ignorance to some of the challenges people were facing, right? Because, I was living on my own. I had a spare bedroom, which I could set up as an office. Whereas I was going, this is brilliant. I can work from home. I can be super flexible, but I don't have children that I've got to homeschool, so I don't have that challenge. And I'm not a kind of flat sharer, younger person, first role in like London, let's say, and you're living 4 people in a 3-bedroom house, and now you've got to work there as well. So it was, I came to it with a bit of ignorance, and I think what we're kind of seeing is that, and I was having a conversation with a client this morning saying, are we going to see people go back to the office full time? And I said, really, we're just going to have to set up businesses differently. We're going to have to allow that flexibility. We're going to have to allow people to coin a friend of mine, James's phrase, be grown-ups. We're going to have to give them the freedom to say, if you want to work from home, but we're going to give you the tools to kind of say that you don't want to do that. And I think the closer we can get to the businesses that get closer to that true flexible model will be the most successful businesses. Because it's not easy to do, right? That's the thing about corporate world. Running one of the large insurance companies has got thousands of employees. If we just went, you just do what you like, here's remote access, crack on, see how you go. It's not going to work. There needs to be some rules and regulations, but the closer we can get, the better, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, as humans, we need connection. Yeah. And so there's a question of how we get that. Yeah. And so there are a number of companies who have, pre-pandemic, had gone to a remote working model, a fully remote.
Yeah.
Everything from like, I think Automatic, I think is the company behind WordPress. So they've done this for like, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
GitLab is another one that's famous for this. And they'll do cool, you know, and this is pre-pandemic. So they had things where like when you join, I know someone who I used to work with, went and took a job there. And so she could work from home and be with her kid and this and that. When she joined, they give you like a gift card, and then you can go to their online store to buy your swag. Right? Because you join a tech company, you want like the hoodie or the thing. Most tech companies, you know, you join the first day and someone hands it to you. There's a storage room full of this gear or swag. It's around, gets given out. If you're fully remote, there's no such thing. But they had an online store. You get a credit. They're not making you pay for it for the store. So it's like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then similarly, like you get an allowance to buy a good desk, a standing desk, monitor, good microphone, headset, and different things like based on your role. If you're going to be in sales, like that needs to be a good camera, needs to be a good microphone or whatnot. So that's kind of, so you had companies doing that before. They also would do things where they would take all that spend that they've been spending on office space, potentially like when you're talking about, you know, it maybe being, you know, expensive office space in Silicon Valley or New York or Boston or even Austin, Texas right now. And then using that not only on the things we just described, but like how do we come together as a company once a quarter? You know, how do teams come together and spend a week or a weekend or time or days together to bond, to do work, to collaborate together, but also to not to do work. And so I think that for us, like we're a small 5-person company that was already had some people across the board anyway. And so we went fully remote. We gave up our little co-working space. And we're not planning to go back there, but it's been challenging not coming together for a year now. You know, in person. And so that's the thing I think is really interesting. And like the big corporates, what does that office look like? Does it look like a collaboration space? Yeah. Do you have places you can hot desk, but does everyone have a desk anymore? Because does everyone need a designated desk at the office? But at the same time, you know, some people don't want to work at home all the time. And there might be days where you don't want to work at home. So, wow. But then cool, what an opportunity for creativity.
Yeah, that's what I see. I mean, I just think we're going to go to this kind of clubhouse, and I don't mean the app. This clubhouse culture of you know, a really flexible workspace. And as you said, I think it's really important what you said. We might need to come together to not be doing loads and loads of work. Maybe we come together to hang out for the day. You know, just to get some energy back. You know, because and you know, everyone has good days and bad days. Like today, I'd have killed to have some kind of colleagues to, you know, to be honest, have a little bitch to about things that have not gone my way. And I think that's important. And I think we underplay the value. Well, I think we can be guilty of underplaying the value of those, you know, water cooler moments and those kind of little kind of breakout coffees that you have in kind of keeping the momentum going. And I think the good thing, look, I don't want to say all the good things that come out of the pandemic because it's risky how it kind of comes out. But I think what's shone a light on is that people have been at home long enough now that they're kind of valuing the things they miss. And I hope there's a path to kind of creating a better kind of corporate culture. Because there's nothing inherently wrong with, you know, big corporate jobs in exciting businesses. Because the other thing about entrepreneurship, it's become very fashionable. And I think that's really dangerous because, you know, it's easy for me to be fast and loose because I don't have children and I don't have responsibilities. And therefore, yeah, if I lost all of my money in my business, it probably wouldn't be a disaster. But your risk profile changes. I think that's why we see people at the start of their kind of lives who are much more kind of risk accommodating. And then at the end of their careers, they tend to be more risk accommodating as well. And actually sometimes the bit in the middle is the tricky bit because the responsibilities.
Yeah, I think that is one aspect. And I think that does play out. I think it's also how you interpret risk as well. Mm-hmm. And also it doesn't mean quitting the job and then having to start the company. No. And so that's where we, you know, so say there are a lot of people who are thriving, and I have some good friends who are thriving in a corporate environment, and they're, you know, the relationships they've built there now allow them to do their job somewhat effortless. and they enjoy the culture of the organization they're within and the opportunities it provides them. I know others where like the risky thing is like they're actually miserable.
Yeah.
They're kind of miserable in the day-to-day. They're not really lit up with the work they're doing or the nature of the culture or the nature of the environment. And so it's like, but it's comfortable because, you know, the bills are getting paid and the kids are getting are getting what they need and provided for. But it's that question, like, what's the biggest risk here? Mm-hmm. Is it to leave and do something different, or is it actually to stay where you are for another 10, 20 years? We all only have one precious life to go and live. But it doesn't have to be, quitting the day job and like, okay, now I'm gonna start something and I have no idea yet. I mean, we've seen so many people now starting, podcasts as well. So like that they might be in this corporate job, but now they're maybe in that industry, they're now creating a podcast around it or related to that and or there's other opportunities there which could be. And I think we talked before about like this idea of like, entrepreneurship. And I think it can work, and I think it can be challenging. I think, all big companies, are trying, and particularly the insurance, are trying to innovate, right? It can also be challenging, and they often create innovation groups, and some are successful and some are not. And how do they find innovation or invest in innovation and invest in companies, to try to access that innovation, but then actually integrate it in but there are different ways, there are different roles within an organization to maybe like really make that change and not, to try to find something more aligned with some of your maybe innate drive or innate purpose.
I'll be honest, I'm on the skeptical side about the term entrepreneurship. I think
it's a bad term personally.
Yeah,
because it's sort of, I do think that like there's this idea of trying to create, I like the other ones, which I've seen in other companies where they create skunkworks projects.
Yeah.
Right. Just like, hey, we're trying to do something. It's like, okay, you guys just go over there and you kind of got some free reign and you're sort of like, you're outside the normal structures and go and see if you can figure something out. Yeah. And so I think that's because it's different from entrepreneurship, but it also can lead to opportunity and then might turn into something more entrepreneurial. Maybe it gets spun out as its own business. And I think you see examples of those there where like bigger companies sort of incubated something that then became its own standalone business. But I think, anyway.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to jump in there because I think it's about giving people responsibility and budgets. Mm-hmm. I think I did a great podcast with the guys, Nick from Casco, and what we were saying, the problem with trying things in big insurance companies, give them a target, give them a ROI they've got to deliver, even on give it a value so you can see if it's actually going to give you a return, and give people the freedom to test things. There's no point starting an innovation function and then either not implementing stuff, not spinning it up, not actually kind of getting out there and testing it. So, I know we can't just like throw money around at things, but allowing people the flexibility, again, giving them the authority to kind of make those decisions and say, we're going to take a bit of budget and we're going to try this new thing. Yeah, because then I think entrepreneurship has some merit because you're taking some money, you're investing it, you're giving it a go on your judgment. I think if you don't give the kind of freedom to do that, then it has a falsehood. It's not. It's meaningless. Otherwise, it's just kind of keeping people entertained, and then it kind of looks at the negative side of corporate culture, which is a bit mummying and not really. You're not giving people responsibility, basically.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting nuances related to the insurance industry, specifically related to this as well, in the sense that it's in the business of risk management, right? And in putting capital at risk and stewarding that. And so it's interesting. We feel, that we're on the innovation there. Some of the things that we sort of observe, the sort of structural, is that we're, as an insurtech trying to partner with a big company, we're asking them to take a chance on something new with us, right? And particularly if it's a new kind of underwriting, a new this or new something like that, where if it goes wrong and blows up, then it's really bad for the company. And so, and it probably cost them their job. Yeah. But if they don't find good opportunities or does that cost them the job? Not so much, right? And if they, these things take time. So I think you're right. How are the incentives set up there? And I'm not sure at times they're often, I'm not sure and I'm not saying it's easy to set up those incentives either.
No, completely agree. I mean, one of the challenges that I've foreseen is that we had a lot of people from kind of essentially tech backgrounds coming into insurance. And everyone likes to talk in the kind of agile culture, minimum viable product. And as one of my guests previously pointed out, it's very hard to do a minimum viable product in insurance, because if you're offering an insurance product, it can't fail. It has to work, and because you have to honor it. So it's very difficult to kind of adopt that mindset. So it naturally imbues a bit less speed. There's a bit more risk kind of management, and so therefore the approach is slightly different. But yeah, I don't envy that challenge, and I think it's very easy for me to sit here as a one-man band going, "Oh, you should be allowed to be as flexible as you like."
Oh, totally. I mean, for us, it was truly 2 years to MVP.
Yeah.
And MVP was a fully an insurance policy sold excess and surplus lines in Texas, by a licensed MGA, us, with a licensed adjuster, us. And paper from an E&S carrier in the state of Texas, and all these kind of things, which were just like, wow, like what a lift, with a policy management system that works, a claim system that can and will pay claims. Yeah. And so you're right, the whole doing MVP on that product side, pretty challenging to MVP an insurance policy. And that has its own things as well. And then how quickly, because really you want to get something out as soon as possible and then continue to learn and adapt.
Yeah, and very difficult to do in this environment. I'm really conscious of our time, and don't want to overstay my welcome. So I always like to ask people, Huw, what's the next 12 months looking like for CyberFortress? What's kind of key on your agenda for the next 12 months?
Our real focus here is in, some of those distribution partnerships, getting those inked and operationalized. That is basically our biggest focus right now. We've done a ton of work to get, a product, and we have, to be able to have a product that works and an underwriting model that supports that. And it's really about getting and this is, classic insurance as well, distribution, right? Yeah. So that's really our big focus for the next 12 months.
Awesome. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me on this kind of wide-ranging, kind of very very non-structured kind of podcast, and it's been really good fun. And I look forward to kind of seeing what you guys get up to with CyberFortress. But thank you once again for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure, Alex. Thank you so much. Thanks for hosting me, and keep up the great work with your listeners.
Thank you.